Hello everyone, thanks for watching today's second video. So we're in the 5-day forecast. You can find that on the home page of the video. Just scroll down a little bit, it's underneath the link. As there's also a written version, you get to about 5 buttons at the top of the page. Going to be a very, very high pressure dominated 5-day forecast. So not going to be much rain going on. And going to get a bit cold as well, I think, in the north. Anyway, at the weekend, it's already cold in the south. That cold air will be spreading northwards over the weekend. If you want to know more about the 5-day forecast, check that out. We're just going to have a look at the weather going out to 10 days away, so I think we're going up to around the 28th of January with this update, and that's just the point where the stratospheric warming is coming into play. Around the 28th of January, it's always been the day that we signal to get the big warming taking place over Siberia, and start to push it in towards the North Pole. I'll start off with all the detail on that in a second. But before I get on with all of that, just say about the ads, I just mentioned them, it's links to articles on the page, just have a browse, visit, click through the links. If there's any articles that you're interested in, you have your space for a website. Thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads for most pages, which own that content. When you watch them, they close back up again. It does help to pay for gaslights.com. So we'll just start off with the situation in the stratosphere. This is at 30 HPA, which is one of the top levels of the atmosphere in the stratosphere. This chart is from the JMA, Japanese Meteorological Agency. The grey line here is the trend through the winter. So we start off in September there, and we go through into the summer over here. And the black line tells us where we've been with those stratospheric temperatures at 30 HPA this season. So we start off again just here in September. Through November, we have a fairly warm stratosphere that was associated with a colder month in November, where the polar vortex was weakened, and we didn't have such strong westerlies. We had the crash in terms of stratospheric temperatures through December. That's it there, going down to that sort of level around Christmas, and we still haven't really recovered from that crash in those stratospheric temperatures. We're still at a very cold level, and colder than average in the stratosphere at 30 HPA over the North Pole. So that's where we are right now, the cold stratosphere at 30 HPA. 10 HPA is a little bit higher up, and very similar story really through the season. Again, same idea. The grey line here is a trend. The black line tells us where we've been. So in November, it wasn't quite as warm at 10 HPA as it was at 30 HPA. And then we still had that crash as we went through December, just there with the temperature at 10 HPA. And since then, we've lifted those temperatures up a little bit. So at 10 HPA, we are actually closer now to the seasonal average. We're not quite back there yet, but we've certainly seen some warming already at 10 HPA over the past few weeks, really since we started the new year. That's not the case at 30 HPA. So it just takes about the two levels, 10 HPA, which is the highest level, 30 HPA, which is a bit lower. They don't always show the same trend, if you like, and we see that right now, which is important to remember actually, because now I'm going to show you the forecast at 10 HPA, which is that top layer from the GFS model. So this is where we're starting off right now, quite a cold stratosphere, although we know it has lifted up a little bit compared to where it was earlier in January. We've had a bit of a warming around the UK and much of Europe actually, and that's something that can precede a sudden stratospheric warming. I've noticed that before. When you get quite a pronounced warming around Europe, it can week or so on, develop into a sudden stratospheric warming over the pole. Anyway, that's where we are right now. And those blue colours show you the cold stratosphere, but we've still got at 10 HPA, remember, which is this level, at 10 HPA over the pole. Let's run through and see what happens, and things stay very similar, really, running through the week. Although we do, on the 24th, there's a little bit of a sudden stratospheric warming starting to appear, or certainly a warming. It's appearing now on the 24th of January now around Siberia. That one doesn't really get in towards the pole. It does try to push in, but still more or less kept around the edges. So we go through to the extended part of the GFS model. This takes us to the 25th, onto the 26th, into the 27th of January. And this is the critical point, really. And it is within 10 days the 10-day time frame now, but around 27th, 28th of January, we get this very dramatic warming occurring over Siberia. Temperatures really shooting up over the in the stratosphere at 10 HPA over Siberia. That warming does push into the pole. There it goes through the end of January into start of February. See the yellow and even red colours pushing in towards the top of the North Pole. That looks a very significant warming taking place. Now, we can't yet say that is a sudden stratospheric warming because we don't know if it's going to propagate down into the troposphere, and to get a sudden stratospheric warming has to have a proper sudden stratospheric warming has to have an effect on the troposphere, which is the layer of the atmosphere where weather is taking place. So what could happen is that the black line here at 10 HPA on this chart shoots up to that sort of level, but we don't get much of a response at 30 HPA, which remember is lower down, it's closer to the troposphere. We might only lift up to that sort of level at 30 HPA. We might not lift up at all. Alternatively, it might propagate down, and we might shoot that right up like that. Very much impossible to say what's going to happen with this, but it is very significant, the warming that is being signalled there at 10 HPA over North Pole. It's just going to be a case of watch your space. And first of all, we've got to see whether this does come off. I think it will come off because it's very well predicted by the GFS. It's been really, really consistent with this for several days, and it is now within the 10-day time frame. Certainly this dramatic warming over Siberia on the 28th, that's within 10 days now. So I think that side of it will come off. We've just got to wait and see whether it does indeed propagate through the atmosphere into the troposphere, what effect it has on the polar vortex, and of course how much blocking we get and where that blocking sits if we do get blocking. The polar vortex doesn't look like it's being completely destroyed by this. Those blue colours there are the cold temperatures in the stratosphere, and certainly it doesn't look like, I think the polar vortex will probably be disruptive. It may not be totally uprooted and sort of destroyed. So we're just going to have to wait and see what's going to happen. It's not an absolutely ideal stratospheric warming, but it is certainly very significant. In terms of the Arctic Oscillation, there's no sign of a response from the atmosphere yet. So this is the Arctic Oscillation observed and forecast chart. The black line here tells us where the Arctic Oscillation has been. The red line's at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go, and that takes us to the start of February just there. So through most of the winter, actually, we've been positive with the Arctic Oscillation. It's just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere. When the Arctic Oscillation is positive, it tells you that you've got low pressure over the pole, you've got an enhanced westerly through the Atlantic and mid-latitude. So a positive Arctic Oscillation is a signal for a mild winter scenario for Europe. We see with the red lines here that at the end that there's no sign that they're going negative. It looks like they're staying positive really through the remainder of January. So certainly on this chart, there's no sign of blocking. And there's no sign of a response, if you like, from that warming. But it would be very early for that anyway. It's normally a couple of weeks on that you get an effect from the atmosphere. So I'd be looking more mid to late February to be seeing signs of blocking appearing over pole from that sudden stratospheric warming that's coming up at the end of the month. GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles next couple of weeks. The red line here is 30-year temperature average. We're going colder than average, or we're around average to colder than average in the south at the moment, and we're going to be staying that way through the weekend. Next week, it looks like we're going to push up in the temperatures. There we go. We're going milder than average then. And then as we go through to the start of February, which is just over here, right at the extended range, looks like generally it's still a little bit milder than average then. Now, I showed you this chart yesterday. It looked very, very wet for next week. It's not as wet now, and I did cast some doubt about how unsettled it's going to be turning, particularly for the south next week, and that's backed up by what's happened. So for this early part of the chart, just very dry through the remainder of this week into the weekend and the start of next week. Then we do get precipitation spikes coming up next week, but it's not the huge deluge that this chart was signalling yesterday. I did say I got doubts about how much rain we're going to get down into the south and southeast, and the fact that these ensembles are now starting to trend drier, I think backs that up. It will turn unsettled for the north and west next week, but how much rain we get down to the southeast, been a very dry winter, of course, so far, and it looks like, to me, that's going to continue to the end of January for the south. Temperature anomalies look like this, so most parts of Europe still really, really cold. All of the holiday destinations through the Med, certainly cold. Even down to North Africa, it looks really cold. I wonder if there's snow in the Sahara. I wouldn't be surprised. So many parts of Europe looking very cold. The UK still just on the periphery of those cold anomalies. Scotland is milder than average. England and Wales is a bit colder than average. Scandinavia, poor old Scandinavia, they've been suffering a very mild winter, and that just goes on for the next week. Temperature anomalies there, insanely warm at around 8 to 10 degrees and milder than average, while most of central southern Europe and through the Med is shivering and probably covered by snow. In America, the temperature anomalies look very warm in the east of the states, colder in the west, so that scenario that we've seen over the past week or so, that continues. Really warm temperature anomalies in many central and eastern parts of America. Precipitation anomalies closer to home look very dry in the west and the northwest of Europe. Looks wetter through the Med, and some of this, with the temperature anomalies so cold, could well be delivering snow. So, places like the Balearic Islands, Mallorca, Minorca, Ibiza, Malta, Corsica, Sardinia, possibly down even into the Costas. I wouldn't be surprised if there's unusual scenes showing up there over the next day or two with snow in those holiday resorts through the Med, whereas further north it remains very dry in the northwest, and then we get up towards northern Europe and snow will be at a premium across Scandinavia. Finally, just having a look at the GFS and ECM then for the next 10 days. So this is, we did be up to 5 days away, of course, which takes us to Monday earlier on. We start off on Sunday, and it looks cold. We are bringing the air up from the continent then. Got a little bit of an upper cold pool developing as well. There could be some snow flurries around on Sunday. It won't amount to much. It might be a little bit of snow blowing in the wind. We go through inside next week. High pressure still dominating. That takes us up to the middle part of the week now. Yesterday we was forecasting the Atlantic to be in by the middle part of the week, but now high pressure is still dominant for most of us anyway, up to Wednesday, keeping the frosty weather going. It's a bit milder with those southwesterlies for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now the southwesterlies finally get through now on Thursday, so that's when we bring mild air across the country, but certainly to the middle part of next week, probably keeping it quite cold and frosty down in the south and southeast. It could well be one of those winters where the southeast comes out with a colder temperature anomaly compared to the north. So compared to Scotland, you might find something like London is colder than Edinburgh for this winter, which is rather unusual to say the least. And just indicative, really, of the unusual pattern we've had this winter. We go through to Friday, and by that point, GFS's placed us all back in that west-southwesterly, so we're all mild and wet and windy, and that takes up to day 10 then, when it's turning unsettled. But I've got doubts, really, about how much this ridge is going to break down, especially for the southeast. Let's wait and see. ECMWF looking like that. So again, there's that upper cold pool that's across the south on Sunday. Still there a little bit on Monday. There's your upper air temperatures. Midnight on Monday, showing the -5 isothermies across England and Wales, particularly. That, let's say, could be producing a few light snow flurries or snow grains. Stays cold up to Tuesday with high pressure dominating. Scotland and Northern Ireland going back into mild southwesterlies on Wednesday, but England and Wales still under that ridge, so probably still quite cold. And that ridge still hanging on in the south even into Thursday with the ECMWF. So I think there it is staying cold in the south and the east. The north and the west looks milder, but nothing's really happened to bring that mild air down into the far southeast. So that's more cold weather going on to second half of next week to the southeast. Cold and dry, have to emphasise that, no frost with that. And then go through, no snow I should say, with that. And then go through to the end of next week, which is Friday, and then up to Saturday, 28th of January, when finally the ECMWF does bring those westerlies, southwesterlies in and pushes that ridge away into central parts of Europe. Whether the westerlies do get in like that at the end of January, Have to wait and see. Certainly the trend at the moment is to keep this high pressure hanging around to the middle of next week, which is a change because yesterday it was forecast that by the middle of next week we would have broken it down and pushed the Atlantic through. So if this carries on in the same trend, then we may never really get the Atlantic through into the southeast. So need to wait and see on that. But for the north and west, I think it will be turning milder, wetter and windier next week. The southeast probably hanging on. Fairly cold and frosty conditions right way up to the middle of next week. Then maybe we get the Atlantic milder influence through by the end of next week. Right, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and tomorrow we'll be looking at the weather next week to 10 days again, so come back for that tomorrow. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.